As the IDF goes into the Gaza Strip in an effort to dislodge Hamas from the territory, ending its ability to govern and um, run militancy out of the territory. The single most significant thing that it's going to face is Hamas's network of tunnels. Israeli officials sometimes refer to this as the Gaza Metro, but it's not a metro like civilians are using it. It is a series of intricate tunnels, not small tunnels. You can even go online and see videos of militants driving motorcycles through them with multiple turnoffs in different places that are intended to be able to move people and weaponry, store weaponry outside of the view of Israeli overhead surveillance. And to be able, once, if Hamas were to do something as it did to try and draw Israel into the Gaza Strip, which is definitely what its strategy was about, it would be able to set up multiple sophisticated ambushes of IDF soldiers in an effort to inflict additional losses and to then grab as many bodies of killed soldiers, wounded soldiers, to have more individuals and corpses to negotiate over. This is an advantage to Hamas militants when you're working in a tight urban area and you are in a defensive position as people are coming in to liberate that territory. But it's not something that is can't be overcome. It's something that means that the Israelis will incur losses. It helps explain a lot of the aerial bombardment that you've seen over the past 2 weeks. The Israelis are trying to take out as much munitions, certain types of munitions, but also key parts of the tunnel as possible. They've reportedly been interrogating some of the Hamas operatives who crossed into Israel who were captured, not killed, and reportedly have collected some more information on the tunnels. And I think that the time it takes to deal with that in advance is one reason why you're seeing a delay in the ground campaign. And the other is because there's a tremendous amount of diplomatic maneuvering going on over the fate of the over 200 hostages who remain in captivity. Only two have been released. The hostages are the second most complicated thing for the Israeli military. To the extent possible, of course, you don't want to kill your own or kill citizens of other countries. That is very, very difficult. And Israel feels that it's in a basically existential conflict right now to protect its citizenry, much, much more than 200 people. But to the extent you can, you want to try and avoid those casualties. So far, I have not seen publicly any country that has hostages putting significant restraint on what Israel needs to do, in part because, unfortunately for Israel, it has more experience in these types of situations and success rate in securing the release of hostages than just about anybody else. So they will clearly do whatever can be done diplomatically, and they seem quite obviously to be willing to delay the ground campaign to do that. That campaign will not be delayed indefinitely. Anybody who doesn't understand that after this type of an invasion, this type of butchery and pogrom, that the Israelis are going to need to from governance in Gaza, doesn't understand the level of trauma, national trauma here. The fact that these communities on the Israeli side were all on the left of the political spectrum, secular. These were the most pro-peace of Israeli society, and these were the ones who were killed so brutally. So on this, there's no disagreement within Israeli society, as much as people really do want this to happen in a way that minimizes casualties on both sides. And so it's telling that Hamas is preventing people from evacuating the north and things like that. This is believed to be very, very extensive. There are all kinds of estimates as to how many miles long. Nobody really knows. But it is absolutely clear that it crisscrosses the urban areas of the Gaza Strip. Are they connected from urban area to urban area? Maybe a few, but I think doubtful. But they are very extensive and have multiple branches in urban areas. So if you shut down one branch, you might not shut down all of it. These are expensive to build. I have been in several Hamas tunnels, not the ones internal to Gaza, but ones that were built east into Israel for the purpose of carrying out attacks. I've been to, I think, at least 5 or 6 of them. And whereas the early ones were built with wood paneling and they were quite short and a flat roof, that would typically cave in because that's not particularly good physics. In time, they built tunnels that had prefabricated cement walls and cement domed ceilings, where you barely had to bend over to go in, with electricity and phone lines and tracks to be able to put a cart on so that you could fill that cart with dirt, connect it to a steel cable that is on an electric pulley system, and you wouldn't even have to break a sweat taking that stuff out. Very sophisticated, very deep. Those tunnels were estimated at costing between $2 and $3 million each. These are much, much longer tunnel systems. It gives you a little bit of the sense of the fraud that Hamas was perpetrating on its own people, taking money from taxes, extorting the population, taking cuts from international humanitarian aid, from salaries that Qatar was paying, etc., using money that was supposed to go to the needs of these civilians, and instead investing and prioritizing the building of military infrastructure. These are not impossible to deal with. If the Israelis have been trying to collect intelligence about this for some time, despite the intelligence failure in terms of the raid, which is significant, it's a different type of intelligence collection, different types of sources and methods that might go into trying to understand the tunnel system. And I think it's fair to assume they probably have some good information. They don't know everything, but I think that this explains in part when you see really disturbing pictures of a road that's been bombed out between two apartment buildings. And why would they hit a road? People will say there's no offices there. It's kind of hard to know if there are offices there or not, but typically the issue is what's beneath the road that they're trying to target. And if they can block off enough of the tunnel system, they can make it more difficult for Hamas to take advantage of them. The tremendous amount of material that goes into Gaza typically comes from and through Israel, more than what comes in through Egypt, through the Arabs crossing. And one of the reasons that's important is because the Israelis will do inspections, and they typically find illicit items, including quadcopter drones and other things. But also they're concerned about how much cement, how many steel pipes, and try to get a sense of, so how much cement is needed to rebuild after Hamas starts a rocket war in 2021 or something like that. And where is that cement being used, and try and follow, okay, well, how many buildings have been built? About how much cement is that? It gives you a sense of how much cement is being siphoned off for other things. And it's not just cement, it's steel pipes and things like that Hamas needs for its domestic rocket production capability. The Israelis have sophisticated weapon systems of their own. The most dangerous moment is when you're approaching a tunnel. Tunnels will be, if you were to find the entrance will be booby trapped. There have been tunnels. There was one tunnel that I studied first person, dug from Gaza into Egypt, making a U-turn into Israel. And inside the tunnel, they had built steel reinforced doors. So clearly the purpose of this was to be able to grab Israelis, kidnap them into the tunnel, close the steel reinforced doors so that when the Israeli military or first responders came in, that would buy them time to get away. That's the kind of sophistication we're talking about. But the Israelis understand this, and they're prepared for it. The other piece of it is not just the tunnel themselves, but the ability to pop up here and to pop up there with an anti-tank guided missile. And to place explosive form projectiles of the type that targeted the U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq, that were perfected by Hezbollah and devised by Iran. And once you provide that technology, they're actually relatively simple to make once you understand how to make that concave shape. And those could be very dangerous, separate from the tunnels in terms of targeting vehicles on the road, especially if there's an ambush and vehicles are stopped. I think there's unanimity across the Israeli political and social divide, a divide which has been put on pause because of their shared national trauma, that the principle, that the idea that Hamas could be kind of bought off if there was enough financial incentive. Just a week before this tragedy, the Israelis, the Netanyahu government of all governments, agreed to increase the number of Gazans to be allowed to work in Israel. Now we understand that some of those people were providing intelligence to Hezbollah, which is how they had such detailed maps in some of these communities that they were working in. This whole idea is over for Israel. And so that only means that Hamas, not Palestinians, Hamas needs to be cut down to size, and there cannot be a situation where Hamas remains in government and is able to abuse these funds that are supposed to help Palestinians to instead invest in a long-term project to literally destroy the state of Israel. Remember, Hamas is not fighting because of occupation. It's not fighting for a two-state solution. It's fighting to destroy the state of Israel and create an Islamist state in all of what it calls historic Palestine. To that end, its enemy is Israel. Its enemy is the Palestinian Authority. Its enemy is secular Palestinians, anybody who's not just like them. And it's telling because the Hamas plan was clear: kill as many Israelis as possible and try and goad the Israelis into something that they knew, Hamas knew, would lead to many civilian deaths, and that they were perfectly fine with that. Given that that's what the Israelis are up against, and given what they've suffered, I don't know any country anywhere that would not do the same. The question is, do they do it in a careful enough way to be able to minimize casualties? Is that possible? And what can be done by the international community, or in particular by Egypt, since it's right next door, to try and help create a situation where as many civilians as possible are, as much as possible, out of harm's way?